Hello, and welcome to the Economics of Streaming Part 2, a panel discussion hosted by Anystream. I'm your moderator, George Klippel, and over the next hour, we will explore changing usage trends as a guide for streaming investment. Now, we've got a great panel for you today, so let's get started with some introductions. Now, to my immediate left is Jeff Allen, the CEO of Anystream. Next to Jeff, we have Adam Cohen, who's the Chief Media Officer of Digital Island, a cable and wireless company. On the right-hand side of myself today, we have Kevin Foreman. He's the General Manager, Partner and Developer Relations for Real Networks. And Stephen Vonderhaar, last but certainly not least, the Director of Media and Entertainment Strategies at the Yankee Group. I'd like to thank all of you for coming today. And before we get started into our questions, I'd like everybody to know a little bit more about your companies, your background in streaming media. So let's start with you, Steve. How is your organization involved in streaming today?
I am Director of Media and Entertainment Strategies, the Entertainment Media Strategies practice for the Yankee Group. We're a Boston-based market research firm tracking the telecommunications and technology sectors. And I specifically look at the streaming media sector in terms of the ways media companies use audio and video to digitally repackage their content for delivery online, and in the ways that corporations seek to deploy audio and video technologies to streamline the way they talk to constituent groups.
Okay. Kevin.
First of all, George, thanks for having me here. Kevin Foreman, I'm with Real Networks. Real Networks is the company that makes software both on the server side and the player side that a lot of people consume with streaming media, and we're a Seattle-based company.
Okay. And Jeff?
Great. Yes, Anystream is a software provider of products that automate the production and distribution of streaming media. Companies such as CNN, Digital Island, Weather.com, Fox, as well as corporations and enterprises such as Dow Chemical, Burlington North Santa Fe Railroad, use our products to dramatically increase the types and formats of streaming media that can be created while simultaneously actually doing it at a significantly lower cost and with less time required to do so.
Okay. And Adam?
It's nice to be here today, George. Digital Island is a global content delivery network today in 70 countries, recently acquired by Cable and Wireless, came into being relative to our streaming offering on the acquisition of my former company, Live Online, which had an inception of 1995, thereabouts, and was focused specifically on streaming as a media type.
Well, today, thank you very much, Adam. And today I'm going to ask our panelists a series of questions, but we'll encourage all of you to head us off the beaten track, if you will, and ask questions of one another throughout the day. So let's begin our session by talking about something that's really on everyone's mind. After the tragic events of 3 weeks ago, there's been a lot of press predicting growth in video conferencing as corporations cut already reduced travel budgets. Now, as we take the next hour or so to explore how these streaming trends are changing, let's start by taking a look at the possibilities for streaming in corporate communications. Steve, if you'll take the first one, that'd be great.
Yeah, now, George, in the wake of September 11th, we can't really think that the streaming media industry has carte blanche to provide audio and video services to corporations just automatically. Yes, the demand is there. Yes, there is increased interest in the deployment of audio and video technologies that can help people communicate on a richer basis over distances. But we saw the same case in the wake of the Persian Gulf War. A lot of interest in video conferencing at that point, but the vendors in that era really did not capitalize on the opportunities that were available. Right now is a golden moment in time for streaming media technology companies, but they have to be able to go out and evangelize to corporations on the ways that streaming media can be used effectively to generate return on investment. And so that's going to be the key as we move forward, is watching streaming media vendors go out and communicate with the corporate community, showing them how audio and video can be used to in sales training applications, in communicating investor relations messages, in providing training for employees, in just overall managing their brands and the way they talk with employees, prospective customers, and current customers.
Adam, do you agree with Steve's comments?
I would concur most definitely. I think that streaming as a media type, largely based on recent events, still has a huge degree of education that needs to occur at an enterprise level. So while I think that there are some great efficiencies that can be created specific to this media type, I would have to also agree that there's still a lot of education and evangelizing of this media type that needs to happen in the industry.
Yeah, I'd like to just jump in though and say maybe I'm more optimistic. I think people often get confused with streaming media and video conferencing. Even though they're related technologies, they're actually different. Video conferencing requires two-way communication, two sets of production equipment, two capture cards, two microphones. And I think that if we look at the Persian Gulf War, the internet didn't exist in 1991. It exists today. People are used to receiving financial conference calls. And in terms of CEO broadcast or investor conference calls, there's only one person that's necessary to actually broadcast, and there's millions of receivers. That's a lot more technologically easy to implement. And there's companies like Anystream and Digital Island on the panel here who are facilitating that. None of those companies existed back in 1991.
It's a cultural issue, too. I mean, we just set up a video conference. It's a cultural shift, right? It's like a telephone call. They have to be there. You have to know it, have to set it up. I don't know those of us that actually use video conferencing. It's not on our daily lives, right? But as you say, in streaming is really nothing more than a very efficient way to reach a huge number of customer bases at relatively low cost. And in essence, it's just a broadcast communication method. So, I think there are some differences. There's certainly the technology infrastructure is much different now, and some of the drivers associated are different now than they were, 10 years ago.
Yeah. So, Jeff, you might find a situation where end users become jazzed at the prospect of democratizing multimedia communications, if you will, but IT departments look at this with a jaundiced eye, though. They're worried about their overall networks going down. Kevin, are you seeing much pushback from the guys who are actually implementing this on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I think that's probably still the number one concern, is what's it going to do to my network. Mm-hmm. But if you look at the infrastructure investments, as an industry, we've got through Y2K. We all thought that MIS directors wouldn't exist after Y2K, and what was going to be the ramifications of Y2K. We've got through that bubble. September 11th has happened, where people are working to get through that bubble. And as a whole, the technology that companies like Adams have created, and what Anystream's created, and we Real Networks have created, allow you to actually minimize a lot of the impact in the network.
And remove the complexity.
Yeah, as a whole, we were really concerned about the last mile providers several years ago, even if you're using the outside internet to broadcast. And I think today the trade-offs are much more, can I get my CEO message to my employee and staff? Can I do that sales training you mentioned earlier? And I think the ROI inside the firewall applications is very positive today and supersede the concerns people have on the network. The other thing that we're finding is on demand. Jeff touched on this earlier. If I'm doing a CEO broadcast, yes, the live application can be heavy, but the amount of on-demand traffic, especially for foreign offices, really mitigates the amount of spikes and peaks in your network.
Yeah, what we're seeing in our research is a whole raft of applications that are focused more on that archive type of content that allows even people within this country to time shift it. You get essentially eliminate some of the opportunity costs of attending these seminars. A salesperson could be attending a key meeting or using their prime time hours for selling, and maybe at the end of the day or a day or two later when their schedules permit, they can tap into this information.
Exactly.
So we've talked a little bit about corporations. Let's go ahead and move on to some of those people using the technology, the buyers of this technology, if you will. Essentially, when streaming first caught the eye of the interest of the technical community, there was a lot of focus on internet-based entertainment, if you remember, driving the charts. They're going to take the lead. But clearly, a lot of those models were unsuccessful. But some of the streaming traffic seems to continue to grow. So from our vantage point now, it's been a year, 18 months later since then. What are some of the key players that are out there today that are really the key buyers of services that exist? So maybe Adam, since you're over at Digital Island and you're providing these services, who are the buyers that are out there?
Well, one of the things that we've seen, I think, in the last 12 to 18 months are some solid technologies that actually allow content providers or content owners to protect their content. Prior to that, I think it was more or less a free-for-all of audio and video, and the more consumption of free streaming video and audio content or multimedia content, the better. I think what we're seeing today is a sanity check on some of that thought process, in that companies like Real Networks recently have announced MCS, Media Commerce Suite, a new tool for packaging, encrypting, and setting business rules around content. So I think with the advent of some really solid, safe technologies that can protect content owners or content rights owners' specific digital content, we're going to see more hybrid business models going forward in terms of being able to monetize that asset. We were talking about video on demand. One of the things that we've seen as a company is that the more live broadcasting we do as a company, and we do a tremendous amount of that, the more on-demand customers we actually create, because 30 days later, that live broadcast becomes an on-demand archive. And so the more live broadcasting we've done as a company, I think is the more on-demand customers we've created, I think, long-term.
Now, what you're talking about there, Adam, is digital rights management. And historically, when we're dealing with media companies, digital rights management has always been about keeping the bad guys out, keeping the pirates from stealing that content and making 1 million copies and making the content absolutely worthless. The key driver of digital rights management right now is not the fear of piracy, but it's in securing new revenue streams for media companies that allow them to digitally repackage content. So DRM technology, through encryption and through licenses that allow limited access to particular media types, open up a whole smorgasbord of potential revenue generation capabilities or opportunities for media companies. You know, you think in terms of music labels, for example, we're able to see access to maybe to certain hit songs on a webcast or download basis for a month before that they are released on albums, and then through DRM technology, be able to go back and shut down access to those digital copies once they hit the retail store shelves in album format. So what it does is it creates revenue windows, or the opportunity for revenue windows, for a whole range of media companies, in much the same way that movie studios had a chance to cash in on the movie rental boom during the 1980s.
Kevin, just out of curiosity, the Real conference just finished up last week. I mean, are you hearing some of these same concerns out there from the people that attended the conference? Same thoughts, same sentiments?
We are. And I think, you know, to answer back to your original question of the change, you know, last year we saw all these new media companies. I never used to hear the word subscription the way I hear today. Our Real Life conference, as you mentioned, we charged $200, and I think last count was something like 500 people from 12 different countries paid their $200 because of fear of travel from September 11th. But we see big brand name coming in, CBS with the Big Brother promotion, Major League Baseball. I think the biggest change I would see over the last 18 months is we used to have a slogan on our wall that the web equals free. That notion is dead now. You know, the Wall Street Journal proved one subscription model. We have with Gold Pass, Major League Baseball, and I think you'll see this hybrid model over the next year and a half where it doesn't have to be free on the web to be successful. In fact, it won't be in many cases.
And you're seeing, you know, once again, in the wake of the events of the 11th, you're seeing the power of the internet again, and specifically in streaming and other data types. And the internet was the #3 source of information following television and radio, right? Not newspapers, not magazines. Right? You're seeing Reuters doing a tremendous amount of customized news production in a for-profit paid service environment through Digital Island. Companies like CNN, ESPN, ABC News, Fox, these companies are launching. They're just using streaming technology as an extension of what they've been doing for 50 years or longer. So I mean, this is going to continue. That's not going away. It's just their audiences are suddenly becoming more targeted to people that take advantage of high-value content and that actually have high bandwidth connections, which are increasingly corporate and enterprise users.
The cost of delivering this media type also, I think we need to keep in mind, is largely prohibitive. So, I think it was a matter of time before we had to start putting together business models that just work. It's business 101 to some extent. So I think a lot of the hype around this media type is sort of dissipated, and I think we're back to a time where we see the opportunity for a fourth broadcast medium. We think that there's a lot of value in this media type, and to Steve's earlier point, I think we've got a lot of education in front of us as an industry to get that wide-scale embracement and adoption.
Yeah, we're really back to the basic blocking and tackling of building a business right now. Back in the age of the narrowband web, there was the assumption that advertising would carry the day. Well, advertising revenues dried up, and we've seen a lot of companies that were reliant on those type of revenue streams disappear as well. Right now, with the broadband web, with the deployment of DRM technologies that enable subscription-type services, maybe the interactive industry has a chance to build the medium right this time. A blend of advertising and subscriptions that might sustain business models over the longer haul. And the trick, though, is going to be conditioning or changing the outlook of consumers who are used to looking to the web as a wellspring of free content, and getting them to suddenly say, yes, I'm willing to pay for that high-value content. So it's going to be very interesting to see efforts from like Real Networks with MusicNet and their ability to generate subscription type of services that are commercially appealing.
Well, Steve, let's stay with you for one more minute if we could, because we've touched a little bit on corporate and entertainment and that. But in the last year, what businesses have you seen in your research that's really shown the largest growth in deploying streaming media services? And what do you predict, again, where do you think you're going to see that large growth in the upcoming 12 months?
Yeah, really, this is the playground for the Fortune 500 companies right now. They have the budgets to support the deployment of this type of technology. They also have the far-flung operations that can benefit through richer communications through connected networks. So all the pieces are in place for Fortune 500 companies, particularly to have embraced. We see examples like Boeing and Coca-Cola, General Mills, a lot of folks who are coming to the table and starting to sample streaming media technology. You're not seeing any corporations, or very few corporations, really embrace it on a corporate-wide basis, but you're increasingly seeing trials and experiments with the technology that really exposes the corporate user to these data types and will start generating creative ideas in the mind of the user. Once they become exposed to these audio and video types, the light bulb goes off and they say, hey, you know, I could use this to do X, Y, Z. And so we're at the very nascent stage where once users are exposed to this technology, they start thinking of ancillary applications that we can't even dream of yet. In terms of corporate applications, we'll really see a lot of promise. Sales training has got to be one of the most robust areas we see. With sales training, you have the ability to work on both sides of the ROI equation. You can keep people out of planes and out of hotel rooms, saving those travel costs. You're also able to communicate product information to your sales force more quickly, so that you're able to perhaps extend the life of a particular new product rollout, or accelerate that rollout so it generates new revenue. So in terms of measuring the ROI, you not only save costs, but you're going to also have measurable revenue generation on the sales side as well.
So our analyst perspective, now our manufacturer perspective. Jeff, what do you think of that?
It's absolutely the case. I mean, what you're seeing, a number of our customers have recently, they're not doing anything new. It's just they're expanding the reach. Right? These companies who used to produce CD-ROMs, they dub and ship video cassettes all over the place. And what they've done is that once they put in a system that is simple, it kind of dissolves in the background. As Stephen said, they forget about that. It's there. They purchased it for one application, right, which is to decrease the time that it takes and increase the reach to get, for example, an OSHA training tape, right, for, say, Burlington North Santa Fe Railroad. Now they have this. It's basically essentially a marginal cost scenario, right? So now they have this network that's, once again, basically free. It's paid for. Right? It's not something that they have a cost basis on. You're not doing broadcasts 24 hours a day. So they're now finding ways to repurpose this content, these training videos, this sales information, this corporate communication that's going out there. And it really comes down to, I think what we're seeing is customers specifically in the corporate and enterprise market are putting in a streaming media infrastructure for a specific purpose, right, for a driving need. And then they're saying, wait a minute, I got this thing. And I can use this for so many different applications, and that's when you're starting to understand it's about reducing complexity and reducing cost to the point where it becomes invisible, and then it's just a new way of doing things, and you pick up both cost savings because of travel, and you pick up timeliness because of reach and better communication throughout the enterprise.
Adam?
I would concur. Corporate communications is definitely a killer application of streaming. It's also, I might point out, very measurable. So one of the benefits that I think this media type brings to large enterprise customers is the ability not to just to drive cost reduction, which translates into ROI and their business case justifications of these investments, but also being able to bridge some of the gaps that currently are present in global corporations that are looking to communicate and have oneness and consistency of internal messaging. I think we all agree that external messaging is something that brings some value relative to this media type. But we're a corporation. Digital Island Cable and Wireless is a company that uses both video conferencing, which is a bidirectional medium, and streaming, which is a one-to-many sort of proposition, internally to train our employees. As an example, recently we completed some very high-level Cisco certification, a lot of which was done through the internet. So there's also, I think, some great efficiencies that have justified the expense of this media type. It's a lot easier for a corporation to justify using it, and I go back to this point that I've sort of pounded home, which is it's a symptom of education. Corporations, once they understand the kind of return on investment or cost reduction that can be driven, I think wholeheartedly embrace the media type. And you know, the events of September 11th have showed us as a company internally a couple of things. Number one, trying to find a video conferencing center in New York City proper has been all but impossible. So there's clearly some opportunities there. Number two, we saw news outlets that have traditional extensions, you know, into broadcast, radio, print, really leveraging the internet, and we saw hundreds and hundreds of thousands of concurrent video streams being delivered at 300 kilobits, 600 kilobits. From our perspective, we also saw that this was a great way to disseminate information as well to external parties. So both internally and externally, I think we've found something that can really increase communications.
Yeah, I throw in one more sort of proof point. We do a lot of our format does a lot of broadcast for investor relations conference calls. And I think one of the surprising things we're finding as an industry are the amount of employees from those individual companies who circle back and listen to their own CFO and CEO talk about the earnings and strategy. I think just sort of a cry.
External broadcast to an internal customer.
Exactly.
Right.
And I think if you look at it, for those people watching this webcast, how many of you have email systems, voicemail systems, cell phones, pagers, Palm Pilots for your staff? And I bet you still miscommunicate, because we still do at Real Networks. And I think 2 years from now, just like you wouldn't consider not working for a company that didn't have voicemail or email, to not have an executive broadcast system, I think will just be unheard of.
Yeah.
Well, I want to expand on that a little bit. I agree that over the next 18 months, the internal or insular type of corporate applications are going to be what drives the streaming media market. That's where you're going to get the ROIs, obviously. Where I think the hockey stick growth comes, though, is from the period of time once enterprises have been exposed to this technology and start saying, okay, that's pretty neat how we talk to our employees using this. Now let's start looking at outside groups and how we can streamline the way we communicate with those folks and create richer channels of communication with customers and prospects. So at Yankee Group, we call the term B2B to C streaming media. Businesses that are in the streaming media industry selling their tools and software to other businesses that in turn use that technology to streamline the way they talk to consumers. And this can take a whole variety of forms, and it's really going to be a blooming in the marketplace from everything from on-demand customer support. If I have questions about installing a particular product, maybe I go to the website and draw that information instead of dialing an 800 number. All of a sudden, I'm giving the customer better service, and oh, by the way, not spending $10 having a person sit on the other end of the line answering that telephone call. And then it can extend all the way to the sales process to a notion that we call on-demand marketing. The notion that you can be at a content-specific site, maybe an Edmunds.com or selling cars, or a CNET.com with computers. And if I'm there, I'm probably in the mode to shop for an automobile or shop for a PC. And as I drill down, there will be opportunities to click on a link to a 90-second commercial related to that minivan. And maybe I can see every company's 90-second infomercial on that particular minivan I'm thinking about buying, and that gets me to learn more about the product in the most powerful marketing venue that a corporation can have, and that's a multimedia marketing message. And being able to address or deliver that type of message in a context when a user is focused on making that purchase decision is just an opportunity for extraordinarily high CPM opportunities for publishers, and a great marketing opportunity for corporations. So that's where we really see the expansive growth of streaming media that is really going to take off is when we see broadband penetration in the residential market at levels that support critical mass usage of these B2B2C style applications.
Okay, before I forget this point. I want to go back for just 1 second because it's guiding to streaming usage trends, changing trends, to guide to your investment. So you've said something about it's the playground of the Fortune 500 today. Adam's brought up the fact that it's really education. It's really education out there today. So what is it that the companies like Real Networks and Anystream is going to have to do to really educate the market, to get those people out there, to make those investments? What does anybody see in that regard?
Part of it is you have to demystify it, right? I mean, part of it is that whether you're in, it's almost like back in the late 80s, the early 90s, the desktop publishing, the days of the Macintosh and Adobe and PostScript. Everyone knew the group that did this. It was in the corner, and they had these funny computers, and they smiled at you, and they made noises, and they had really big printers, right? And that's kind of the way it is now with streaming today. It's still it's a very mystical, difficult process. It's complex. Still, sometimes it's very expensive, and that's just, let's say, on the buy side or on the creation side, right? On the distribution side, at the IT groups, you have these people that are understandably paranoid about flooding their network with rampant streaming video. And I think what needs to happen, I go back to the first point, is generally we're finding customers in the corporate and enterprise space that have purpose-built applications. They're putting in streaming media for a specific purpose, and they're doing it in such a way that they create a marginal cost basis on that. For instance, the majority of our customers that have this stuff, they get it for a reason to radically decrease their cost or increase their reach, and then they find out that they have 80% excess capacity, right? I mean, unbelievable capacity at a marginal cost basis. So I think what needs to happen is that these things have to be educated. You have to pick an application that you can understand, that you can build a champion around. You have to get it deployed then, and at that point, you need to understand the fact that there's so many more things you can do with it, and don't try to go in with this ethereal claim that you're going to save the world with streaming media, but pick a single application, go in there, solve it, and say, okay, let's move into horizontal application areas that I can use this capacity that's essentially paid for.
Yeah, and the key aspect that you talked about is the champion. Within the corporation, you have to have that person who's going to carry the water for you, whether that be a marketing executive who's trying to communicate outward bound messages, or a human resources executive who's trying to improve training. You got to identify that one person within the corporation who can recognize the ROI benefits associated with deploying the technology, and then fight the battles that need to be fought to get it implemented, because it's not an easy thing to do.
Well, one of the things that we're doing at Real Networks is we're trying to lead by example. Take the tragedy of the 11th of the month. A lot of people had their conferences. People were canceling their conferences. I'm hearing there's conferences even in November that were canceled. At Real Networks, we took a different approach. With our recent conference, we actually said, let's double down and actually do it online live and charge $200. And now we're being flooded with calls, well, maybe flooded is an exaggeration, but over 10 at least from other conference companies saying, hey, how do we do this for the dentist convention and the floor covering convention and conventions you wouldn't think exist. The other one is the subscription model. As Jeff alluded to earlier, Gold Pass, now called Real One, has 400,000 subscribers paying $10 a month. And 400,000 might not seem like a big number, but that's the 12th largest MSO in the country right there. And the nice part about what we do at Real Networks is we don't think that's going to be the only subscription model. We actually encourage all the content broadcasters to go out and get their own. And again, I think we've helped demystify the web to say it doesn't have to be free, and we've ate our own dog food. And when back to those proven business models of subscription and advertising, and hopefully we've shown those business models actually work, so other people will jump in.
Well, I'm going to move ahead to one of the questions that I had saved for later, but it's more appropriate right now. You mentioned just a second ago, Steve, regarding the IT departments or some champion within an organization. And maybe that's causing some of the education or some of the confusion or some of the adoption issues of making that investment stretch. Because, what is it? Is it the IT department that champions the effort to get streaming media in-house and brings it in and it works within that individual department? Or do you find that it's the training or marketing departments trying to drive the charge? Or is there just at that level even confusion on who's driving the charge and making that decision or push or champion, as you put it, to get the streaming technology in the door?
Well, you have to remember what is going to drive the purchase of this technology. It's return on investment. So if you're going into an IT department, are they going to recognize the ROI associated with deploying streaming media? Probably not. They're going to see that as more of a hassle, more of a cost than anything else. So what you have to do is you have to identify the functional departments that are going to be deploying a particular audio or video style application, and communicate with that individual exactly how a streaming media application can transform the way they do business. because there are substantial return on investment stories where you see double or triple the payback from an investment in a tailored, focused streaming media style application. But if you don't have a specific person in a functional department who's recognizing the value of that particular application, you're not going to go anywhere. An IT department is not going to go out to the people in marketing and say, "Boy, we have this nifty new technology. Why don't you come on and give it a sample?" They're going to want to lay low and keep as many burdens off their network as is possible. Introducing streaming media for the IT department is introducing more work and more complexity to deal with, and so you need that functional person who's focused on the application and recognizes the need for deploying that application.
Well, Adam, maybe you could talk just a little bit more about that, because obviously your company went through a huge change. You're not only here in New York, obviously LA and Japan as well. When you hit that impasse, where was the driver for you to make the technology change that you did over a year ago in your encoding practices? Was it IT? Was it marketing? Was it collective? How did you? A little bit about the process for our viewers.
I think ideas are generally conceived inside of marketing departments at a high level. I think that to Steve's point, the IT departments are the ones that measure the risk. So while this may be a great idea and a wonderful technology, and maybe it's something that's going to drive a lot of cost reduction, ultimately I think the IT departments function autonomously. And in some instances, the education that I keep referring to is very directed at that IT department, because they've got an internal corporate risk relative to their core businesses, their brick and mortar businesses. So I think we find ourselves extremely challenged in terms of minimizing that risk to receive all of these benefits. And I think it's no different inside of our own company. As we built out a global infrastructure, production centers, data centers that are attached to this private network, I think we had some of those same tribulations in terms of, bust the firewall. Getting streaming packets and rich media packets through a firewall is a very, very difficult proposition. Probably something we could talk about here, all day long. So we very much are drinking our own Kool-Aid as well, in that we had a lot of those IT risk issues and conversations that we had to overcome in order to really leverage this media type internally in our own corporation, and we're very streaming focused as a company.
Okay, so we're drinking Kool-Aid, we're eating dog food. I don't know what else we'll be doing before the end of this show, but let's go on to broadcasters. What do you think of that? Are they continuing to invest, the broadcast community today, in streaming, and how are they using it? And also, just before I finish that one, maybe Jeff, you can start there. Do you see that changing in the coming year or so?
Yeah, that's as far as Anystream goes. That's an overwhelming trend. It's just accelerating. It's continuing. I mean, while it's true, the internet.com bubble, streaming media started at entertainment. And then it really moved to media and news, and now it's coming to enterprise. Media and news continues to grow. I mean, it absolutely positively is continuing to grow. For some of our earliest customers, CNN, for example, is now deploying this across CNN, CNN-FN, CNN-SI, Turner Sports. I mean, this is in the span of a year, right? This is not happenstance. Reuters is doing an amazing amount of content over the web today. So news and information, if you think about, forget streaming media as a data type, forget it as a technology. What does it do, right? It's got incredible reach. Right? It allows you to get to a number of different locations in terms of not just demographic groups, but across both the internal and the external internet, the intranet. It's the same protocol. This is an amazing concept, and it's very, very fast. It's very, very timely, which is, it's a glove and hand fit, hand and glove fit rather for news operations. So we're seeing, in fact, acceleration of that, and particularly in Europe as well.
Yeah, I just want to comment. One of the things, not to put a plug in for Real Networks, but we just launched Real One, which is a new platform really meant for the media companies as a whole. If you look at us as an industry over the last 5 years, we've taken these media knowledgeable companies and introduced this new data type and forced them to learn it called HTML. And to their heart, they're media and audio companies, and we forced them to have all their .com derivatives and learn all these different HTML algorithms. What our strategy been with Real One is to really let CNN, for example, Jeff, be back to a media company and augment that with contextual-based HTML. We realize it's a 15-inch experience and not a 30-foot experience. But somehow in our industry, we've made the HTML the predominant text, and audio and video be the afterthought. We've tried to now put that back to its natural being of audio and video first, augmented by contextual-based HTML. And I think you'll see those websites really transform themselves, where they lead with audio and video, especially with broadband now at, 11 million users in the United States have access to broadband, which is really where it gets
That's
exciting.
just at home.
Yeah, that's where, from these media companies, that's where things get exciting and they can be back to their natural selves as to, again, learning all these HTML rules and letting that lead. Because today they've acted more like newspapers than media companies.
Right.
Our goal, I think, with the people on the panel and others in the industry is to make them back to media companies again.
I'm going to be a bit of a voice of dissension here in terms of media's opportunities in the sector, at least over the short term. Jeff, I have no doubt that Anystream has experienced a land rush of business from media companies in the past year, and I think I can explain that. It's media companies are having difficulty finding viable business models on the web, even on the broadband web at this point. Anystream happens to make a technology that really reduces the cost of publishing, and by the way, also helps these companies publish much faster. So it's the perfect solution for media companies. It also happens to be a perfect solution for media companies who are treating the web as a placeholder. The notion that there's just a rush of advertising coming in, or any type of financial support for the development of online media in the classic sense just really isn't there right now. For many media companies, I think you're seeing the web, and particularly the deployment of stream media applications, as kind of a defensive move, making sure that they don't miss out on market opportunities that may emerge 2, 3, 4 years down the line when broadband does hit the mass market stats. Now, what Real Networks is doing with Real One and historically with Gold Pass are great first steps. But if you do the math, that's still, I think, less than 50 million over in annual revenues for subscriptions overall, and that's by the time you pay for the network delivery costs and the software associated with launching these services. There's not much left over to actually develop content. There will be a time at the future, 2 to 3 years down the road, when we do see the development of viable business models. And God bless Real Networks. If you guys weren't pushing the subscription model now, that market wouldn't blossom 3 years from now. But I think it's a little bit too early to anoint media as the media delivery as the key application for online audio and online video.
I think you raised a valid point there, just in that if I liken that to sort of our experience in our brief but brilliant streaming careers, in early '95, folks would scratch their head and say, why are you working so hard to do this produced and directed multi-camera, postage stamp size jerky video? And people just couldn't fathom why we worked so hard to provide production value and all of these things. And I think the point that you just made is really the answer, and that is, in order for these things to be pervasive 3 years from now, and again, I want to also say, thanks to Real Networks for driving some of these hybrid business models, we need to start today. We need to learn today. We need to figure out what the problems are going to be in terms of scaling these potential opportunities for us.
And that's why you see media companies deploying right now, because they recognize that you got to figure out what the business models are going to be. You just can't wake up 24 months from now and say, "Oh, let's flip a switch and streaming's going to happen." Right. You got to take baby steps first, and you got to invest right now to start to make that happen.
Well, what are companies like DI and Digital Island, Cable Wireless, and Anystream doing to reduce costs? I mean, costs are obviously high and barrier to entry in that.
We've made a significant investment relative to Anystream agility infrastructure in our production centers for a lot of reasons. The most prominent reason was that we're a content delivery network. We're focused on the delivery of these digital bits to either consumers or to enterprise customers. One of the things that we didn't want to have to worry about in that process was, number one, scale, And then number two, the efficiencies of being able to produce lots of this content for our entertainment and media customers and our enterprise customers was also very, very important. So as a company, we chose agility, and we were joined with some of our customers in that decision. Folks like Reuters recognized that this was a very, very important part of the equation, maybe not something that they wanted to become experts on, but certainly something that they appreciate today in terms of the vast scale that they've gotten from agility. So I think it's important to point out that a lot of our customers that end up getting the end result benefits of deploying something like an Anystream agility system, they're aware of it, they appreciate it, they've found a way to scale the production of this media type, which in and of itself is challenging, but they don't want to get involved in it sometimes maybe more than that. They definitely know that agility is behind it and has scaled and reduced the cost of production, but to Steve's earlier point, they're more focused on building their brand, their core business. They don't have to worry about compression, and I think that's really the point. They didn't become compression experts. What they got to be, what they were able to do was focus on their brand, focus on their core business, leave the technology piece to a partner like Anystream and Digital Island Cable and Wireless, and I think that that's something that we'll see more or less across the board.
And it's the same thing in the corporate market. I mean, we talk about why do people buy streaming? They don't. No one wants streaming. Yeah. They want to train. They want to communicate. They just want to do it better. They want to do it faster. They want to do it with more reach. And I think the biggest thing that we can do as a company is reduce the complexity and kind of make it transparent again. I mean, think about it. If you just think about it in this perspective, if you look at Microsoft Word right now as compared to a desktop publishing system 10 years ago, I mean, it's insane. But people are publishing all the time. They don't even know it. It's a word processor. It's because it's not publishing anymore. Well, people shouldn't be streaming. They should just be communicating. Sure. I mean, that's the deal. The deal is get it down to, if everyone had to have a big printer with special machines in a back room with cooling and chemicals, and no one would be doing high-quality correspondence today, right? And I think that's the state we are. We're streaming right now. We're at a point where it's still too difficult, it's still too mystical, it's still too expensive, and if you're lucky enough to find an application with a good ROI and you win at it, you can't scale. Because now you got to add all this cost and all this equipment, all this inefficiency and personnel, and you have to find a situation where once you deploy it, you have a marginal cost basis where you can deploy it widespread without thinking about the complexity. Here's
another interesting item. Sorry, we're often asked, how is your streaming business? How has your streaming business evolved? What are some of the big obstacles in your, quote, streaming business? From a content delivery network standpoint, we don't really view this as our streaming business. That would be like saying, how's your GIF and JPEG business in the core caching ends of your network? Right. So it's important to understand that this is but another media type from a content delivery network standpoint that we need to be able to cater to. And there will be new pervasive media types, we think, even going forward. So we're taking a more pure sense of the world in that we acknowledge that streaming is definitely its own media type, but we don't section and cordon it off relative to some of the other types of data that we deliver.
Well, stay on you for one more second. Hang on one second, if you would, Stephen. But on the side, Adam, for a word that's being used a lot in this industry right now is automation, for an example. So how important is that to you in your business model and how you work your business? Is that really, is it getting the credit that it deserves in the way that it's being played up?
I keep referring to Reuters, but they're such a great example relative to what we're talking about. Reuters as a company approached us with the need to develop essentially 7 products in 5 countries specific to local languages and the nuances of local markets like Japan, which has got a very big wireless capability in it. Besides that pure desire to offset their core media offering with an online media product, they had a requirement that said if we need to multiply by 25 times the amount of content that gets produced specific to this media type, and we call you at 11 o'clock at night, on a Thursday night, we expect that Friday morning. And that's that's sort of a tough charter to spec out in advance of growing a business and a partnership. One of the reasons why we chose agility was specifically that. From our perspective, our agility nodes in all of our production centers around the world, and we've got it deployed in LA, we've got it deployed in Japan, we've got it deployed, in New York, they operate as one system. From our perspective, scale is not something that we are ever concerned about. And that was really important. To be able to scale 25x in 24 hours is something that I think is near impossible in the traditional sense of how you may view scale.
So another cost reducer, automation, again, also tosses into the cost reduction. Steve, you had a comment. I don't want to forget that, but I also wanted to get your opinion on automation. How important is that you're finding in your research?
Yeah, automation is going to be key to driving down the costs associated with deploying this technology, because almost at every step of the stream media value chain, you see that the more people you reach, the more costs you incur. And the more content you have, the more costs you incur. If you're able to start to deploy automation to any step in the value chain, you start to move more towards that broadcast model of where you can make it once and reach a greater audience and hopefully be able to generate revenues either through subscriptions or advertising that can help cover those costs. So to the extent you can use automation and not incur, so if you would incur extra costs from producing 75 clips of video content instead of 25 clips, and you had to add 3 people to do that, those are salaries that go straight to your expense line. Whereas if you can use automation to provide that type of expansion, you have a greater library of content that's available, and the overall costs associated with publishing multimedia content can be spread over a wider base of content, and that just makes the financial models and the guys with the spreadsheets a lot happier.
Yeah, exactly. How about Real Networks? What's your view on that?
I can't disagree with anyone's comments here, to the point where our market research has indicated to us that the cost of streaming, the bandwidth cost most predominantly, which is still the biggest cost, have gone down 42% year over year over the last few years. So I think the tricky part now is, do I take advantage of those, or do I continue to wait for the future? I think that's the delicate trade-off we've been talking about in terms of being a first mover, getting the right models, the branding, the mind share, the buzz, as people talk about it, versus saying, okay, if overall streaming costs are going down 42% even next year, I'll wait till the ROI model's a slam dunk. And I think that's the risk reward, and why you see CBS with Big Brother doing this. They believe that the subscription model was going to actually achieve the levels it did. That was a big risk. In hindsight, in the rearview mirror, it seemed obvious that I think Real Networks published over 25,000 people signed up for I think $20 for a season's pass to those cameras. But the cynics were out there. The same way the cynics in 1906, when Henry Ford said that everyone should have their own car, and cynics said, no, there wouldn't be enough chauffeurs in the world. Right? Now that's all silly. But and I think that's to Jeff's comment of we'll all be communicating and we'll be using the web. It's just we're going to hide the complexity and reduce the costs to a wider audience.
And let's see if we can bring in one more community, if you will, the Hollywood community, just for a moment, and talk a little bit about them. I mean, how do you think Hollywood's planning out its digital future? When and how do you see the major studios out there deploying streaming or other digital media strategies? I mean, right now you can get trailers almost anywhere you go, right? You can see a trailer on this one, a trailer on that. Where are they going to go? What are they going to do?
Yeah, right now you're seeing the major movie studios participating in efforts such as MovieFly, Movies.com, which primarily are oriented to distributing secure digital forms of movies on a download basis. They're telling us right now that they think that with a broadband connection you could download a movie, say, in 35, 40, 45 minutes or so. Not quite real-time delivery, not quite impulse purchase, but it gets you closer to the notion that maybe digital distribution has some type of future. The key thing that you got to think about, though, is that right now those bits are being downloaded to PCs, and the PC is by its nature a productivity-oriented tool, as opposed to an entertainment venue. And the question is, are people really going to sit in front of their PC and watch a 2-hour new blockbuster release? I would submit that that's probably not going to be the case. So MovieFly and Movies.com are probably more of a placeholder right now for the movie industry that helps them maybe fend off advances from a would-be Napster for movies that would try to pirate movies. At least you have some entities in place on behalf of the movie studios to say, hey, there's real damage happening to one of our businesses. Where you really see digitization take a significant role is going to be in the download and delivery of movies over venues that where people are accustomed to sampling entertainment content. So your cable networks equipped with set-top boxes, your satellite services, and there will be a whole range of ways to use both video on demand and storage type of applications using digital video recorders like that have TiVo-like functionalities to make those available on a pay-per-view basis. But that gets us away from streaming. So, but in terms of the PC, it's a download environment right now that's a placeholder for future efforts.
I would augment that by saying the studios are really going to watch the lead of the labels, the record labels. They're all going out in a matter of now 30 to 60 days with MusicNet and Press Play and what we're doing there. And that's high-value content that has a shelf life of several years, unlike newscasts, which typically has a shelf life of 24 hours for local sports news and weather and the like. So I think the studios will change as we evolve as a business model on the labels and what happens to the music area. And just to augment what you're saying, Stephen, I think the amount of proliferation of home devices that are IP enabled this Christmas, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. Recently Hewlett-Packard announced their DEC, Digital Entertainment Center, that has a real player inside of it. And I think those are much more going to be the devices where I want to enjoy IP-delivered movies. Mm-hmm. And I think you'll see this trickleware sort of approach where I order the movie from my office and during my drive home it's there. So when after dinner and the kids are in bed, you can watch the movie and you will have infinite access or more infinite access without the download time being perceived as there. Right? It's there while you're driving home or feeding the kids or whatever.
Well, again, we're fortunate to have the industry experts today. So what advice should we be giving people out there on where streaming investment is likely going to go in the next 6 to 12 months? Or, if you will, if an organization has been holding off to making a streaming purchase for a while, why is now a good time to move forward? What do you think, Adam?
I think one of the things that we addressed in this forum was Moore's law relative to streaming and infrastructure and the cost of actually delivering this media type. I think it has some of the same qualities as RAM and even CPU processors. We're seeing that cost is one of the biggest drivers today for embracing this media type. And then second, and I think we've done a good job of addressing this, the physical cost reductions and efficiencies that can be created by adoption of this media type are not to be overlooked, I think, for enterprise customers. And then I think, lastly, the ability to communicate has always been a problem. If we take a look at this at 30,000 square feet, the events of September 11th were a horrible thing, but what they did was they showed us also that we've got a long way to go in terms of how we communicate as businesses, as people. And I think that if you look at this particular media type, we've got an opportunity today to use this media type to increase communications, be they corporate communications or one-on-one communications. It's leverageable today. It's, from a cost perspective, feasible. And three, the cost reductions can't be overlooked at this point.
I think you have a confluence of factors. Bandwidth is more available than ever before. You have literally a glut of bandwidth out there. Plus, you've had 5 years of software development on the commercial web, creating communication applications that can be woven in together with the audio and video to create a fuller, more interactive experience. So, we are seeing it at the first point in time where all these capabilities, multimedia capabilities, and streamlined traditional narrowband web applications are coming together at a single point, and it creates a new opportunity.
Great. So the time. Oh, sorry.
And you can't ignore the macroeconomic climate, right? Before September 11th, one would argue where we were in a recession or flat or whatever the case is. But the fact of the matter is, there's more of an emphasis now than ever on being efficient and cost control. And I think people aren't really concerned about streaming. They're looking at saving costs and doing the same thing, doing more with less. And to the degree that streaming can be deployed in those existing applications to do that, I think you're going to see growth. That's just what it's about.
So not to run out of time, but we're going to move on to our customer questions. Basically, the panel, I think, concurs. The time is now. We received quite a few questions from those of you who registered for today's webcast and want to close out our program by answering just a few of them. Now, if we don't get to your question today, someone from Anystream will make sure to respond to you with an answer within the next few days or so. So the first question we're going to throw out there, we'll start with you, Steve, if you will. What do you believe is the split between the enterprise and entertainment sectors of the market, both in terms of volume and revenue? And within each of these sectors, which applications do you believe are really becoming the fastest growing? Is it sports, music, investor relations, training, etc.? And this is from someone over in Ireland at servcast.com.
Well, I think really the split is leaning more towards the corporate side at this point. The enterprise style applications are going to be generating the higher returns on investment, justifying the rollout or the deployment of these style technologies. So if you had to put a revenue or volume split, I would say a 75-25, leaning more towards the corporate side. We've talked about some of my hesitations regarding the entertainment market, and that's a sector that's going to be developing over the long haul. So very much more the enterprise side. And as we discussed earlier, when you look at enterprise applications, in particular, you're seeing a case where sales training is going to provide the biggest bang for the buck.
Okay, Kevin, with broadband deployment some years away from the majority of users, why is the consideration of media groups to deploy low bandwidth solutions such a forgotten goal? This is from someone at myoffices.com. What are your thoughts there?
Well, that's a tricky question. You know, I look back when we started Real Networks about 7 years ago, and the amount of just 14.4 modems that were there. And again, 14.4 modems are pretty small now. I think we look at the amount of broadband users there are today. There are more broadband users today, I think 11 million inside the U.S. homes alone, than there were just regular 14.4 modems back then when we started. So, well, I think that the broadband area is an area that's exciting because you can do those rich applications where you want to see. Narrowband is still a great opportunity to reach the mobile devices. You know, I think a lot of broadcasters are going to move towards a video and/or a video PowerPoint and/or just an audio feed where you know, the wireless devices can hear the conference call for the analyst, for example, where broadband users could even see the video of the CFO, and maybe those band users can actually see audio and PowerPoint. So I think you'll still see a proliferation. We talked a lot about automation and reaching the widest audience. Those devices out there are going to make the audience for broadband, narrowband even more diverse. And I think the advice we've been giving people listening is to author once, broadcast everywhere, and hopefully that will still be the case in the future.
Great. Now, someone from the Golf Channel wants to know, when do you see handheld devices becoming a realistic distribution method for streaming enriched media? Is it too soon to be investing resources in it? And that's, again, from the Golf Channel. So, Jeff, maybe you and both.
Yeah, it's really
a
two-part answer, I guess I would say. From a content, from media, from communication, from subscription-type content, I mean, really where we're seeing the focuses of that is where you have the consumption devices, which by and large is in Asia, specific Japan, and somewhat degree in Europe, right, where there's obviously economic issues with 2.5G and 3G rollout, but that's where you're starting to see the consumption devices. In fact, they're already shipping and actually available today. I think conversely on the enterprise side, you're also starting to see that now. The UPS just announced, I think, 200,000, they're going to deploy 200,000 Pocket PC-based handhelds, right, for automation, for shop floor manufacturing, for shipping, for non-knowledge worker-based systems where that's their primary interface. At that point, you have to realize that's not a barcode scanner. That's not a shipping or a manifest receiving tool. It's also a broadcast consuming device. So I think you're going to see it on an enterprise market where the devices are available, and once again on the media and entertainment side, once again where the devices are available. And today that's not generally in the U.S.
Adam, I mean, do you have a follow-up to that? I know you have some installations in Japan that kind of are unique to that.
I would agree that to answer the question, it's today. I think going back to an earlier point, scalability is sometimes being able to author an asset and deliver it more or less on any platform. That's something that as a company was one of the characteristics of agility and Anystream that we bought into, was this notion of authoring a piece of content and delivering it in as many wide scenarios as possible. So today we deliver wireless content. I think in every instance that we're delivering broadband content, there is a wireless bit rate that is offered. So the second part of that is audio is a killer application. At 16 kilobits, there are very few people who can't receive audio with even a PowerPoint slide. So I think the answer is yes, and I think that there are folks that have proliferation of devices that can receive even narrowband signals, and they can have pretty pervasive experiences.
Okay, very good. I'd like to thank all of you for joining us for the Economics of Streaming webcast today, brought to you again by Anystream. I'd also like to thank our panelists for some lively and very informative discussion. Now, we are about to end our program, but before we do, I'd like to remind all of you to take just a minute, fill out your online survey that we have there for you. You'll see a little button that says fill out the survey. That's going to help us make these a little bit better. Plus, if you do, you're going to automatically be registered to win a compact iPad Pocket PC. Now, we're going to notify this winner by email on this Friday, October 5th. Now, that's all for now. Keep checking back to www.anystream.com for more news and information on other webcasts, so you'll find out when we're going to do our next one. For Jeff Allen and Adam Cohen, Kevin Foreman, and Steve Vonderhaar, I'm George Klippel. Have a great day. Thank you.